Well, the Pistons won on the road without Cade, and that makes it 4 in a row. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Pistons Daily, your go to podcast for daily Detroit Pistons content, game recaps, Coach T's keys, trade rumors, and real conversations about what's working and what's not with your Detroit Pistons. I'm your host, Tony Nash, aka Coach T. And if you love the Pistons like I do, you've come to the right place because that's what we talk about here on Pistons Daily just about every single day. And so if you haven't already, please head on over to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with all your friends. You can watch or listen to Pistons Daily anywhere a podcast can be found. So if you're a fan of the show, please leave us a 5-star review. Anything you can do to support the channel, support this podcast, we would greatly appreciate it because we are trying to build this community here to show our Pistons how much their fans love them. Remember, this is a fan podcast, and so we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the fans. I, too, am a lifelong Pistons fan, and so I'm sharing with you every day my opinions, my thoughts, and I love it when you interact with me in the comments. Okay, so let's get into last night's game against the Pelicans. Pistons on the road, 112-104. Another good defensive game, holding a team almost under 100 points. Obviously shorthanded without Cade. Detroit never trailed the entire night, so we came out kind of locked in from the jump. There were some rough patches, and the Pelicans kind of just hung around all night, but our team just stayed focused, and whenever they would go on a run, we would kind of get a few and even things out, and we kind of, for the most game, it always felt like we were in control. There was never a moment where I was worried that we were not going to win the game or that they were going to make a comeback. There were a few times they got it to within 5, even to within 4. But yet it always felt like the team was in control and that we had a good grasp on the game. Of course, whenever you don't have your best player there, there's always going to be some miscues. But, I love to see who's going to step up for our team each night. This makes our 4th straight win and 7 out of our last 8, so we're doing really well. And in those last 8 games, the defense has been great. We're going to talk about that in a second. The tone was set immediately with Jalen Duren with that windmill dunk right off the bat. I haven't seen him do that in a game this year. That play they drew up was amazing. It cleared everybody to the right side, opened the lane wide open for Jalen Duren, and he got an easy dunk. So that was a great way to start the game. We started out 13-0. And we really just kind of kept that pace the whole night. Like I said, really between 8 and 12 was the lead for most of the time. Again, New Orleans cut it, to within 4 or 5 a few times, but then we would just take it right back. Of course, they made a push lately. Micah Peavy had a great game, hit a 3 to cut it to 101-96 toward the end there. But we answered and we closed it out like a veteran team. Even though we don't have a lot of veterans on this team, we really are closing out those close games when we need to. And then, Jalen Duren with 20 and 15, big game for him. I expect that when Cade's not in the lineup, and he is, that he should be our leading scorer most nights, that he should lead, and he did. Just absolute bully ball, controlled the glass. I did think he was a little sloppy with the ball a few times, got stripped and got turned over, but for the most part, JD played like the man-child that he is. Protected the paint presence all night. Duncan Robinson again with another great game, 15 points, 4 threes. He's averaging, I think, 15 plus over his last 5 games, 6 games, and just really coming into his own. Obviously, he's had good moments all year. I've been a big fan of what Duncan Robinson is doing, but just continues right now. He's on that heater. Just a big spacing piece, that keeps the defense guessing, makes it impossible to play zone. Changes directions, changes positions, doesn't stand still, doesn't just sit on the perimeter and wait to get the ball passed to him, always in movement. And, reminds me a little bit of Rip Hamilton without the athleticism. Rip was a little more athletic, and Rip was just deadly with that mid-range. But Duncan Robinson, the way he moves and keeps the defense on the move is really, really good. And then Dennis Jenkins came in, took the starting role for Cade, 17 points. It just shows his confidence, his poise. He hit timely buckets for us, just brought energy, stayed ready, got into a little foul trouble early. I know he had 5 turnovers, but tell me, what more does Dennis have to do? I put this question out on a lot of Facebook groups last night. I got some really interesting comments back, and I'm sure they'll continue to come in. But what more does Dennis Jenkins need to do to prove that he really is the backup point guard for this team over Caris LeVert? And I realize that Caris LeVert is not a true point guard, but we are putting him in as the backup for Cade. We know that Jaden Ivey can't play point. And we know that Asar Thompson can't run the point. There are guys that can bring the ball up, but in terms of running the offense, and this is what I want people to understand, there are a lot of guys that can walk the ball up the court, right? But that's not a point guard. A point guard is somebody who runs the offense smoothly, makes good decisions, finds guys in their spots. He's the quarterback, the general of the game. And one of our biggest problems is when Cade goes out, there's nobody really who is the floor general. And if you look at our stats when Cade is off the floor, it's staggering. And I believe it's not because we don't still have good players, it's because nobody's running the offense. And Caris LeVert certainly does not run in the offense. And Jaden Ivey is just too timid right now to run the offense. He's not a big decision maker. He's really coming more of a spot up shooter. He's still not back to his, where he was. But Dennis Jenkins plays with poise, plays with confidence, comes in and gets buckets when we need them. Doesn't turn the ball over a ton. Again, last night, 5 turnovers. But when you're running the point, you're going to have turnovers. Caris LeVert can get 5 turnovers in much less time, and his are typically real sloppy. And so I just like seeing what Dennis does. I just feel like when he's in there, our offense, it's efficient. It moves right. The plays get called and they get executed. He's finding guys in their spots. And so I want to hear from you. Like, what more do you think Dennis Jenkins needs to do to just get that spot from Caris LeVert or take his minutes? I said this the other day. In no world should Caris LeVert be playing, especially backup point guard, when Dennis Jenkins is available. And I realize the history with Caris LeVert and what he's brought on past teams. And I think for the right team, Caris LeVert would be an incredible piece, but he's just not for this team. In my opinion, some of you said he's a bigger guard, he plays better defense. I disagree with the fact that he plays better defense. He certainly doesn't bring us better offense. He's very, very streaky. Dennis Jenkins, in the limited amount of time he's had on the court this year, has done some big things. And so I think if you give him Caris's minutes and allow him to continue to develop and mess up and let him be that strong, steady backup for Cade, I think that really puts us in a good position. And then, our defense really was the key to this win, which is really the last 7 wins. It's been about defense. We have found our defensive identity again. Teams are averaging 95.6 points per game over the last 7 games, which is incredible in today's NBA. We've been playing connected, physical discipline. Our paint defense and rebounding has been good. It's traveled with us. Obviously, Stu and Duran anchoring the interior. The wings are competing, recovering, closing out well, switching when they need to. The hustle is there. We're contesting shots. We're getting a lot of defensive rebounds. We're limiting second chances. Of course, New Orleans had more second chance points last night than I would have liked. But our team is playing well. And the best part is, even when teams make a run, we just don't panic. There's no worry. It never feels like the guys are concerned that, oh no, the game's out of hand. The guys just stay calm. They look back and respond. So I really think a lot of that has to do with that big losing streak they had. It did affect their mentality, and it did teach them how to experience those kind of defeats and to push through it and to fight through it, and it's kind of hardened them. And I think from what we're seeing, this team looks very, very mature. And I've tried to be cautiously optimistic all season, but the Pistons just continue to win, and they continue to beat good teams, and they continue to be consistent. And I just find I think it's going to be hard for anyone to beat this team in a 7-game series. I really, really do, because we haven't lost more than 2 in a row all season. And I think that was only twice, if I'm correct. I could be wrong on that. But I just think it's going to be very, very tough. And who knows what will happen around the trade deadline. We're going to be talking about trades a lot over the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. But who knows what will happen. We had I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about Trey Murphy a little bit. Sadiq Bey last night led New Orleans with 20 points. Sadiq can ball. He's a good player. I was really disappointed when we traded him. Not that I'm upset that, with what we have, but Sadiq, I felt like, fit the Detroit mentality. And I don't know if we'll ever see him back in a Pistons uniform, but he's a player that I wouldn't be too sad. I don't know what we do with him or where we put him, but he played really well last night. Zion Williamson started out. He didn't warm up with the team, and then he left early in the third quarter. So, another guy that just perpetually injured. Had he stayed healthy, he probably would be in that conversation the way he played in college. And even when he started out, he's an explosive player, and he would have been probably a top 5, top 10 player in the NBA had he not been hurt so much. But he finished with 4 points in 15 minutes. We held Trey Murphy to 17 on 6 of 19 shooting. And, Trey Murphy is a great player. And I don't know that we got the best picture of him last night. I don't know if maybe he's heard his name come up in Pistons trade rumors and wanted to put on a good show, because I'm certain he can't be happy there in New Orleans. I could be wrong, but no one likes to lose, right? And when you think, I could get traded to a team that is a real contender, that's got to be enticing for any good player. So he didn't do great, but of course the defense was really good on him. He was guarding Duncan Robinson all night, and Duncan Robinson kind of got the shots he wanted. So he didn't overly impress me on defense, but his energy was there and his effort was there. He's an explosive player. He is up there in the league in dunks and three-pointers made. He's been, scored more than 21 points the last 6 games, with the exception of last night. So Detroit really made him work, and he ended I guess it was an 8-game streak of 20-plus points, and Detroit ended that last night. Of course, Micah Peavy had probably one of his better games, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 4 steals. He was really one of their few players to bring consistent energy. Watching Jordan Poole, I loved Jordan Poole in college, and then even when he played for the Warriors, I think that system was really good for him. But he's just struggling, man. I mean, he's very shifty with the ball, but his shot selection, his decision-making is bad. He could be, with the right coach, I think he could be a really, really good piece. So I hate seeing him struggle, but he had a couple of good moments last night. So to me, this was one of those wins that good teams do. Great teams win these ones. We controlled the game. We didn't mess around too much. We handled our business on the road, never trailed, got our 4th straight win, and our defense stayed elite. So let me know your thoughts about the game against the Pelicans. Wasn't too exciting. There was a few big moments, but just a good overall win for us. Always good when we stay in the win column. And then I don't know if you guys saw this, but I saw this post come up, and I'll just show it to you here. This came up on several Facebook and Instagram and different groups that I'm in, saying, if you could add one player from the 04 Pistons to the current roster, who would it be? And I thought, man, that was an interesting question. And I really kind of contemplated that. I ended up putting Sheed as my pick because, a good stretch 4. Although, my thoughts about Stu. I think Stu and Duren could be very much like a Ben Wallace-Rasheed combo. Stu still has a lot of upside. He could really turn into, a very consistent offensive player. One of the great things about Sheed, for those of you who remember, is, he could have a night where he dropped 30, but then have a few games in a row where he drops 5 or 10 if he wasn't needed. He was a great team player, a great locker room guy, understood the Detroit mentality, and was great. So I think if I had to pick one, obviously the stretch 4 position is where we kind of are lacking. Although, again, I think we have the answer to that in Stu. Tobias has some great games, no question about it. And I think, again, he should come off the bench and do what he does. And it would really help that second unit. But then I also thought Rip. I love what Duncan's doing, but Rip Hamilton, man, I think he was a more consistent scorer. Definitely a better defender, more athletic, more speed. Wasn't as good of a three-point shooter as Duncan, but the way he moved and the way he made defenders work, and a lot of times he would get the best player, at least the best guard on the other team, so he would wear them out, man. He would run them in circles, and if you remember in that 04 Pistons championship, Rip and even Chauncey running Kobe around and just made him work. And so I don't know. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think? If you had to take one of those starters, Big Ben, Rasheed, Chauncey, Rip, or Tayshaun, and put them on this Pistons team, and I guess it doesn't mean they have to be a starter, but you could inject them into this team, who would you pick and why? I think all of those guys would need to be a starter, maybe with the exception of Tayshaun Prince. But those 4 guys would definitely need a starting role, and so you'd really have to replace a starter. So I'd love to hear from you. I thought that was just a fun post, just to kind of think back as fans. Those were some good days for us. Who would you pick to be that replacement there? And then, I saw some stuff recently come up about our draft, and, I think the Pistons have drafted really, really well as of late. Really since 21, we've really improved our drafting. Obviously, Troy Weaver was a big part of that, and even Trajan Langdon now. I think these guys are really good. But, looking back at our draft history since the early 2000s, it has not been great. 2003 is the infamous one where we drafted Darko Milicic over Wade, Bosch, Melo. Of course, at that time, everybody was wanting to get the next Dirk, the next European player that was just going to come on the scene and dominate. There were not as many European players back then that were playing at the level that we're seeing now. I mean, a lot of the top 10 players in the NBA right now are foreign players, but that wasn't always the case. So everyone was kind of hoping to get that next guy. From everything I hear, Darko dominated back in the day. I've read that Darko had a huge impact on Nikola Jokic. So in his league and where he was, he played well. I could see what Joe D maybe thought he was trying to do, but man, how many times have I thought, had we drafted Melo or drafted Wade, like what could have been? We really could have been a dynasty, I think, if we could have had. I think Melo should have been the one we should have drafted. And Melo came off a national championship and never really won in the NBA other than when he played with Chauncey in New York and Denver. They had some winning seasons. And I think had he been brought into that culture around those guys, around those teams, it would have made him a different player. And I think that would have been crazy. 2010, we drafted Greg Monroe over Paul George and Gordon Hayward. Tough. 2011, we drafted Brandon Knight over Kemba Walker, Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, and Jimmy Butler. So big miss there. 2013, you drafted Caldwell Pope over CJ McCollum, over Steven Adams, over Giannis Antetokounmpo, over Rudy Gobert. 2015, we drafted Stanley Johnson over Devin Booker and Justice Winslow. 2017, we drafted Luke Kennard over Donovan Mitchell and Kyle Kuzma. Definitely wouldn't want Kyle Kuzma on our team. And you never really know when you're drafting. I mean, it's always a gamble. And there goes my beeper again. It's always a gamble when you're drafting, and you try to look at, what's going to work, what's not. You look at their college experience, and if you look at the NBA draft, historically, the top 10 picks, typically only 3 or 4 of them ever really pan out. So there is some luck involved. I think there is a skill to it though, and I think Troy Weaver figured it out, as well as Trajan. But then, we all remember in 2020 the big draft of Killian Hayes, and we had big hopes for him. He was our 7th pick, but we picked him over Obi Toppin, over Tyrese Halliburton. Obviously, we picked him over Stu. We could have got Tyrese Maxey, Peyton Pritchard, Desmond Bane, all who have had better NBA careers. Killian Hayes is now in the G League and just never, ever panned out to be what we thought he was going to be. And then in 2021, we did, probably our greatest draft pick since Grant Hill. And then, of course, we know what happened with Grant Hill. But then before that, maybe Isaiah Thomas. And we've had some good drafts. We've had some good late drafts in our time. But Cade was number 1 pick. Obviously, I wouldn't change that for anything. 2022, we got Jaden Ivey at number 5. Behind him was Jalen Williams and Dyson Daniels. Again, I love Ivy, and maybe had he not got hurt, we'd be talking a lot differently about him right now. We also traded for Duren that year, so that was a good move. 2023, we got Asar Thompson at number 5, and he was the best pick at number 5. No one really listed after him, I think, has had a better And then last year, Ron Holland was number 5, or 2024, Ron Holland was number 5. And I think that was the good pick. I mean, I looked at who got drafted after him. There's no one there that really I think I would have changed. And then 2025, obviously at 37, we got Chaz Lanier, which I think was a steal of the draft. And hopefully we'll see more from Chaz. So, you know, we've had some woes, but it's been good lately. This is why I say when we talk about these trade talks, we've drafted so well over the last few years that if we had to give up a few picks to get the right piece at this trade deadline, I don't think it's that detrimental. Most of our picks over the next 3 to 4 years, if things go like they are probably going to be late first round picks anyways. And so if there were ever a time to give up some picks, probably now is the time if we can do it for the right piece. So keep in mind when everyone says we don't want to give up draft picks, as long as we don't give up draft picks 5-6 years from now, and we're just doing the next couple of years, I think we've done well so we can afford to give up a little bit of draft capital there. So let me know if you agree with that, disagree. Pistons have had a tough time with the draft historically, but have done really well over the last few years. And then I want to end today's episode with a clip that I saw on the Run It Back podcast on FanDuel. And they said that Detroit is building something special right now and that veteran players should want to come and play for Detroit. These guys were talking about how when they played, you're always watching other teams and what teams would be fun to play for. And he's like, if you're a vet, you should want to come play for Detroit right now. He says, obviously the Pistons are building something special. He says you got Cade, who is just the guy and is going to end up being one of those great players. He goes, any player should want to play with Cade Cunningham because he makes his guys better. He talked about Jalen Duren, just going to be an unbelievable center and going to be a great piece for the team. Talked about how deep we are. He talked about a lot of those things. Said that there's just a winning mentality in Detroit, which a lot of teams don't have. And then he said they're just well coached, the front office is great, the culture is great, the ownership is great. And so high praise coming from some former NBA players, and it's great to see. And I agree, Detroit is built different right now. There's something special happening here, and I hope it lasts for a lot of years. I think with Trajan Langdon at the helm, we're not going to mortgage our future. As long as we can avoid injuries, I think we could have a really good team for a lot of years to come. And so I hope that we see that. So that's all I got for you guys today. A little bit late on the podcast today. I apologize, but enjoy. I hope you all have a great Thursday. We'll be back in action tomorrow night against the Houston Rockets. I will be in attendance. That'll be a good game. We'll get to see the Twins go at each other. It's always fun to watch KD, and it will be a big win for us. We beat them earlier this season, but they're playing well, and so it'll be a good test for us. Hopefully we'll have Cade back. It looks like his injury was just, feeling a little ill, a little bit of hip pain, but I do anticipate him playing Friday night, and we're definitely going to need him. So I want to hear from you guys. Let me know your comments about these wins. Let me know your thoughts about which player you'd put in that from the 04 team. Who would you put on the Pistons now? Let me know your thoughts about the draft. Just good to reminisce there for a minute. And then about what this team is doing right now. It's a special, special team. So thanks again for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're getting very close to 3,000 subscribers, so make sure you do that. Share this on all your Facebook groups. Share it with your friends. Let people know we're here, and let's keep building this community. And as always, Detroit basketball. Let's go, baby.